I think that in New Zealand, when we have like 70% Pākehā, that's white people, the way you define yourself as an Asian person is a little bit two-pronged. So the way I would define myself is a lot of, the things I'm interested in, the things that I'm passionate about, the things I love. I love storytelling, I love film, I love literature, I love art and music, but the way that people ask you to define yourself when you are a minority is different. So when someone asks me how they define myself in New Zealand, especially if they're a white person, they don't want to hear, oh, I was born in Wellington, like I've lived here my whole life. They want to hear, my dad's Chinese and my mum is Filipino. And then to them, they go, oh, that makes sense. But for me, if I say, I was born in Wellington and I love choral music from Germany, they're like, I don't understand, like it doesn't connect. So I think that the way that I define myself changes a little bit based on who I'm talking to and the social context of why I'm being asked to define myself.
So I define myself by what I do mostly. If I were to give a little bit of insight into who I am, I would say that I'm a nutritionist, I love science, I find that stuff really interesting. I love to move my body, whether that's dance or yoga or running. I don't really have anything that underpins who I am, like spiritually, so I would define myself by what I do, yeah.
I have a lot of cultural identities, like my mum is Filipino, I grew up with Filipinos, but I'm a New Zealander, I'm a Kiwi. My dad is Chinese, but also I have an American passport. So I have a lot of different cultural identities that I express in different contexts.
My parents are from South Africa, but they themselves have tried to move away from their culture. I don't really feel like a strong tie to where I'm from.
With cultural identity, you need to be really aware of how you feel about the context that you're part of and how people might try to weaponize it against you. Like, for example, I am a communications major, so with advertising, right? Advertising, they always try to target a demographic by things that they see as common traits or things that they see as exploitable in you. They might advertise a product to women being like pink and pretty and like subtle, floral, because they think that you identify with the cultural expectations for what a woman is. And so they can exploit that to get your money. Cultural identity gives rise to like nationalism, to like in-grouping, like cults, all of these kinds of things can be exploited. Cultural identity is like really important and part of your heart, but also something that you need to be very self-aware about in order to not be taken advantage of by people who also see your cultural identity as something they can exploit. Yeah, I think that a lot of people who grow up mixed or as part of a diaspora community, it's like you are like Hannah Montana. You live like two different lives. At school with all the white people, you like assimilate and you try your best not to stand out too much. Like, you don't bring seaweed and rice for lunch. You have your jam sandwich or whatever it is. And then once you're out of school and you're with your community, you're a completely different person. You're louder, you're more excited, you are more outgoing, you do, your cultural dances and food, you speak your language. So it's sometimes a problem in that it can feel like you're acting, but it's really just like code switching is what you call it when, you express these different cultural identities at different times. I'm Chinese and I'm Filipino, right? And China and the Philippines famously have a lot of political problems with each other. There are a lot of stereotypes within the Philippines about Chinese people, and there are a lot of stereotypes about Filipino people in China. When people start talking about, oh, like, Chinese people, this and that, it's like, that's me, but I'm also part of this in-group and I want to be part of this in-group. So how do I fit in with this in-group when I'm also part of the out-group? You get a little bit of like almost imposter syndrome where you don't really necessarily fit perfectly into any cultural identity, but it's still yours.
So I danced for my whole life, and one big thing for me is because I danced my whole life, there are certain like body norms and like diet culture norms, if you will, that are quite prevalent in New Zealand. I know that in my life that has affected me quite a lot, like the way that you look and the amount of pressure put on your appearance. You kind of come to terms every time you go to dance, like if you are smaller, if you are thinner, you get placed at the front. Ballet, like I had a friend who had severe anorexia and she went into recovery, and my ballet teacher said to me, she was like, it's so sad because she had the perfect physique. So there is just so much pressure in that area, and like I struggled with restriction, I struggled with like self-hatred and like just, yeah, so many negative self-thoughts. So it's not been easy for me. I have a family that puts a lot of pressure on that, a mother who is like that as well, and I think it's generational, and it affects a lot of people. Yeah.
I think it's very ongoing. The thing that has really helped for me is that, so I am trying to work in film, so film production, and in film there's been an explosion of like Asian American or like Asian diaspora media where they represent the experiences that, you know, I have or I had as a child and that I still have now. And so having those stories told and feeling like I'm part of this other thing that wasn't really so recognized before, that can feel really comforting. Getting in touch with your culture in a way that you love, you're not forcing it, helps you feel connected.
I think for me, it's been a lot of like surrounding myself with young people who have the same ideas as me, and people who, you know, are going against fat phobia, are making biases more known and like aware, and like working on their own biases, especially around like body image and like, yeah, fat phobia and diet culture and all those sort of things. But that's how I work on it. I've got some amazing friends that have changed my perception of myself and the world around me, but that has taken a long time to kind of find people who have those same interests and those same ideas. So yeah, I think it's a process. My healthy coping mechanisms are probably journaling, running, being like, I mean, a big thing for me is community and friends. So I don't think it's wise to tackle any mental health issue on your own. I think it's like you need people who you can surround yourself with who have similar ideas, and like that's been super important for me. But on my own, yeah, just finding the right people, that's a whole process in itself, and doing things that like make my soul feel good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that having a little bit of an unconventional solution to something can be really good for you, especially if we're talking about mental health. Like nothing is really one size fits all. Like what works for one person to overcome their, you know, self-sabotage may not work for someone else. Being open to trying other unconventional things, yeah, I think that can be really healthy. So one thing about Kiwi culture is that we have a very strong DIY sense. So in New Zealand, if something happens, if something breaks or if something goes wrong, everyone just says like, just do it yourself. So there's a very strong sort of like improvisation, like creative problem solving culture in New Zealand. And I think that has shaped a lot of how I approach problems.
Everything changes. Nothing in life is permanent. So when you know that, it makes life feel a little bit less hard when you're going through those hard moments, because it's not going to be like that forever. Things will get better.